I just needed help on like how to guide me on how to put together my personal statement. So what I've done was that I've written down some questions and then I've answered them. The only issue that I have is like, how do I know which question would go first or second and like third?
Okay, so tell me a little more about what those questions are, or rather, what topics you're covering.
So usually on the topics I covered are, for example, because at school we have like a little sheet that tells us like to help us write our personal statements, and some of the questions was like, why did we choose to go to law school, or when was it that we knew that we wanted to go to law school, and then also it asks like, what do we have to offer, what qualities do we have to offer to those law schools that would make us stand out from everybody else. Also, there's other questions. Let me grab the little sheet that I have.
Okay, well, let's just stick with your story personally.
Okay.
The qualities thing, to me, that is not something to write about in the statement itself. Like, not to say, I'm dedicated, I'm hardworking, I have a passion for law, I love arguing. Those are not things to say. Those are definitely on my don't list. Don't do that. Definitely don't do that. Tell me something about yourself. Tell me a story about why you want to go to law school, or something you've done. Where's the story in this?
Well, for me, for like law school, what makes me want to go is that the fact that my family, my parents immigrated to the U.S. And so I guess you can say that from them immigrating to the U.S., it was really hard for them to like find a job. There was a lot of like injustice. And so growing up with that made me realize that I want to go to law school because I want to be that voice for people who I guess you can say that people who are really not seen because they're not from here.
Okay, so tell me one specific injustice they faced and how it impacted you personally.
Well, I would say that it would be like discrimination. And so that had impacted me because I've growing up constantly, I would see people making my parents less. And so I feel like every human should be treated equally despite where you come from, or the lack of English that you speak. They weren't really ever taken serious because of that. And I just felt like that wasn't correct.
Is that something the law could fix, though?
Well, not really, but what I kind of look at it is the way that the way that I look at it is like, okay, like the children down at the border, they don't really have a voice. They don't really know the language. And so when I think of it, it's like, okay, well, I'll go to law school and I'll go study like immigration law. And then I'll try and do what I can and help with them down there.
Okay, that strikes me as more reasonable because you're tying your personal story, or rather your parents' story. So we've still got to work a little bit more to keep it on you specifically. But then you're tying that to say, okay, well, immigrants face hardship, immigrants face discrimination. Although the discrimination my parents faced often was not legal in nature, it still relates to being treated like second-class citizens. And in current events, we see this happening notably with children at the border, undocumented immigrants at the border, facing hardships, being treated as lesser than. I want to help change the law to advocate for them.
Correct.
But still, part of the problem here is that you're talking a lot about your parents, and we still haven't dialed down to one specific instance of discrimination that you personally either experienced or witnessed, or at least you can point concretely to how it impacted you personally. One common issue with statements about parents or family members is that it's too much about them, not enough about you. I also want you to think about, is this a statement that only you could write, or are there potentially hundreds or thousands of other applicants who also come from immigrant backgrounds, also facing hardships and discrimination? So I want us to get more specific with anecdotes, with stories that only you could tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then I think of it as like, yeah, there's probably going to be thousands of other people kind of writing about the same thing. So that won't really make me stand out from everybody else because there is other stories.
Right.
Also, the other stuff that I was thinking about is about how I grew up in like a very, I guess you can say like in a very abusive household too. So that kind of like ties in also as like, I feel like it ties in as like an advocate as well to help like women with like domestic violence and or anything that has to do with abuse.
Sure. Yeah, that could absolutely make for a compelling statement. You want to be careful about it, though, not to only focus on the negative. You don't want them walking away crying because they feel sorry for what you went through. You want to at least show something about how you grew from the experience, obstacles you overcame, and what you've learned from it, and how you can use that to help others going forward. But make sure that you don't focus too much on the negatives and you do what you can to end on a positive note, even if it was obviously a very difficult experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know that in there when I was writing, like in there, I would talk about the abuse, but then I would also talk about how, despite that the obstacles were really difficult, I was still able to manage to overcome it to the point where I continued my education. I went further. Now that I want to go to law school because I want to help people who go through that. Also kind of, I guess you can say, kind of move on from that and kind of continue living their life and kind of saying like, well, I went through that same thing, but yet I'm over here trying to live my life and also be like the support and kind of help them a little bit too.
You certainly can. And I'm honestly more excited about this statement because it's more personal. It's much more in the first person. I'm hearing a lot more I and direct personal statements, whereas the other one was focused more on your parents and the children at the border, not as much about you. I think you can still write an essay on that topic as well. It's going to take a bit more work. I think these are both great topics. I would consider making one of them a personal statement and the other one a diversity statement.
Okay.
And it doesn't even really matter that much which one, because they're both diverse characteristics that you bring to the table from your background. So I would think about simply, which one do you have more to say about? Which one could be a longer one? The longer one could be the personal statement. The other one could be the diversity statement. Diversity is not only racial and ethnic in background. It could be anything unique about your background. And certainly being in an abusive household is something unique that would add something to what you would share in a law school classroom.
Yeah, because I feel like that one would be more like the personal where I get to talk about myself. And then the diversity one, I can talk about like my family and my cultural background and kind of touch a little bit about that. But I feel like the other one would be the perfect one to be like my personal statement because that's the moment to talk about me and kind of let them know like, oh, well, I went through this, but even because of that, I still want to go to law school because I want to help change.
Certainly. Yeah. And for either one of these statements or both, you can weave in something about why law school, whether you want to advocate for victims of domestic abuse or domestic violence, or you want to advocate for undocumented immigrants or just immigrants in general who are facing discrimination. You can certainly work that into one or both statements. But it's something to show and illustrate through the stories that you tell. And then again, the thing about quality is the qualities are, again, something you want to show rather than tell. So don't say, I'm dedicated or I'm hardworking. Instead, talk about what you've done in the context of overcoming these challenges, which will show that, which will illustrate that.
Okay. And then in there, would I also put in like, I currently do volunteering over at a nonprofit organization for immigration?
You can mention it in passing, but I would also want you to trust that they will see it on your resume and that it's not the place to throw in every related extracurricular that you've had. You don't want to lose focus. The core of the statement is your story and what you've experienced, or in the case of the other one, what your parents experienced and how that impacted you.
Okay, that kind of makes it a little bit more clear now for me to kind of work on my personal statement, because I had originally kind of like tied both of those in, but now I see like more clear about like talk about my experience first and then talk about the other one in the other statement. So that kind of helps me kind of get an idea how I would like prioritize my questions on my sheet.
Excellent. Now you've used the sheet, you've used it up to this point. For now, I want you to put the sheet aside and just focus on free writing. Just open up a Word document or open up a notebook, and I want you to write at least 1,500 words on each of these two topics. 1,500 words, which is much longer than the final drafts will be. But you need a longer rough draft, then you can cut out all of what isn't truly necessary. So you're left with the core that is jam-packed, full of compelling narrative.
Okay. That would definitely help a lot too.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think you've reached your insight for today, Lizeth. Before we sign off, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
I would say what really helped was that we got to actually find two main points. And that helped a lot to find two main points, because I feel like when we get caught up in so much writing that we forget to separate stuff, that we feel like it all goes together. And so after this call really helped me know that they might seem similar, but they do go separate, my two topics.
Awesome. I love it. Well, please keep in touch and let me know if I can help in any way as you move forward with these.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.